Aston Martin is one of the longest standing marques in motoring history of any nationality. But given the absolute carnage that has been the British motor industry's various upheavals and overhauls over the decades, it's even more impressive to think how long the company from Gaydon has been making cars. Its products are rarely perfect, but what they lack in precision, they more than make up for in charm and raw appeal. Charm and appeal, though, help very little in the flaming heat of motorsport competition, and there have been the odd one or two flops on track. But motorsport involves failing before you rise, so there are a lot of successes in the Aston Martin back catalogue. Here's a few that stand proud. And if you do enjoy this video, if you think to yourself, yeah, I'm having a good time now, please remember to click the like button and then subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to make sure you see everything we ever put out at Goodwood Road and Racing. There's a good chance you've never heard of the Arnold DB24 competition Spider, and you'd be in good company. Very few people have. But let us put it on your radar, for very good reasons, including the fact that this car probably saved Bertone from extinction. Back in 1950, Chicago-based car importer Stanley Arnold, delightfully nicknamed Wacky, decided the time was right to build his own car. Arnold met with the people from Gruppo Bertone in 1952 and then executives from Aston Martin in 1953 and arranged to purchase 7 Aston Martin DB2/4 chassis. These would then be transferred to Bertone in Italy for bespoke bodywork to be applied. 1 road car and 3 racing cars were actually made before Aston Martin realised that, actually, the DB2/4 was quite a good car and they wanted to sell them themselves. The remaining chassis would never make it to Arnold. But Wacky Arnold had 4 cars in his hands to enjoy or sell. None of the Arnold DB2/4 cars ever did anything really of note in their competition history, but their very existence is definitely believed to have saved Bertone, which would otherwise have been on the verge of bankruptcy. Those 4 cars kept Bertone afloat, although only just. There was a shortage in Bertone's key building medium, aluminium, and thus assembly was a lot more difficult than expected. In the end, the only option was to hand beat each body out of steel. No easy task. But we think best Aston Martin racing cars doesn't have to mean everything is the most successful. Without the Arnold DB2/4, there's a good chance we would have never seen the Lamborghini Miura or the Lancia Stratos. Right, on to the really good ones. It would be totally laughable to make this video without talking about the Aston Martin DBR1. Development of the iconic Aston Martin DBR1 began in the 1950s after the company realised its DB3S had probably reached something of a development ceiling. A well-timed change in sports car racing regulations allowed Aston Martin to experiment with doing something a little different. The result was the DBR1. It had the front suspension from the DB3S but an entirely different rear setup. The DB3S's ladder chassis was replaced with a new tube frame and a 2.5 litre straight-six engine was mated to the existing 5-speed gearbox. The DBR1 debuted at the 1956 Le Mans 24 Hours, proceeding to retire after 10 hours. 1957, its first full season in the World Sports Car Championship, yielded a pair of second places before the engine was enlarged to 3 litres for 1958. Bigger engine installed, the DBR1 almost immediately won the Spa 1000 kilometres, finally ready to challenge Ferrari, Jaguar and Maserati. But it would still be over a year before the DBR1 really started showing its stuff. Arguably, its greatest racing achievements and those of Aston Martin both came in 1959. First, in the hands of Carroll Shelby and Roy Salvadori, the DBR1 finally won the Le Mans 24 Hours, defeating Ferrari by a quite frankly bonkers 26 laps. Then, a few months later, right here at Goodwood, Stirling Moss crowned the glory with one of the greatest drives of all time. With Aston Martin challenging for a first World Sports Car Championship 2 points clear of the field, Moss sped away from the rest of the field in his DBR1. With the title in his hands, he came into the pits, and his car promptly caught fire. Unhurt, Moss jumped out and was bundled into the second DBR1 that had been driven by Shelby and Jack Fairman. But he was now down the field. Moss, driving perhaps the greatest race of his life, carved through the field, winning the race and sending the title the way of Aston Martin. The DBR1 remains to this day the only Aston Martin to do that double, and with that history comes value. A DBR1 will now set you back about £20 million. Aston Martin owner David Brown decided that the DBR1's successes were more than enough, and he began to move Aston Martin's direction away from racing and back to road cars. But it turned out that if you won races and world championships, people quite liked your cars. And Brown ended up receiving letters from Aston dealerships across the globe begging for a new race program off the back of which to sell cars. Thus, the Aston Martin project cars were born. The first, Aston Martin Design Project 212, or DP212, was a modified DB4 chassis with an aerodynamic body and a bigger 4-litre straight-six engine. It raced at Le Mans in 1962 with little success, and drivers complained of aero issues. Next was DP214, even further removed from its DB4 base and designed to race around the world rather than just at Le Mans. With a repositioned engine and a new nose and tail to avoid the aerodynamic lifting drivers had experienced in 212, DP214 would go on to win several races, including one in support of the Italian Grand Prix. But it was the final project car that could easily be deemed the finest. Quite an achievement, given that it was designed and built in just 8 weeks with a total budget of £1,500. After 8 weeks of what we can only imagine was monumental stress, the team made it. In the hands of Phil Hill and Lucien Bianchi, the car lapped 6 seconds a lap faster than its Ferrari 250 rival. During the race, DP215 would become the first car to crack 300 km an hour on the Mulsanne Straight and very nearly hit 200 miles an hour in the process. Sadly, that was it for DP215. Its gearbox gave in just 2 hours into the race, unable to keep a lid on the engine's now monstrous torque. Then, a little while later, the only model crashed at 100 miles an hour on the M1 and was written off. Thankfully, it has since been restored and was sold in 2017 for the princely sum of $21 million. Frankly, the sonorous noise of the Aston Martin DBR9's singing V12 should be enough for its own place on any list, without ever bothering to look at its trifling little racing record. Based on the already stunning DB9 road car, the DBR9 was a collaboration between ProDrive and Aston Martin for an assault on the GT1 class. Changes from the road car included an aluminium and composite tub, new rear subframe, double wishbone suspension, carbon body panels, and an aluminium roof. Altogether, it was a whopping 610 kilograms lighter than the DB9. The engine, all 6 litres of it, was a V12 and was roughly based on the one in the road car, but with basically everything else stripped away. It was, in total, designed to have a lifespan of around 30 hours. And it worked. First in bringing Aston Martin back to the track for the first time in decades, and then in literal winning terms. On its race debut in 2005 at Sebring, the DBR9 won its class, before following that up with a podium at Le Mans. The car became one of the most dominant GT1 cars around the globe, and its battle with Corvette would only intensify as the years went by. In 2007, the DBR9 defeated the American cars at Le Sarthe for the first time, with Darren Turner, David Brabham and ex-BTCC champion Ricard Rydell crossing the line for victory. While the GT1 class was really not long for this world, the DBR9 would return for one final victory in 2008. But that wasn't quite the end of the Aston Martin story at Le Mans. Away from tin tops, Aston Martin did have another go at overall victory in prototype racing. While the Lola-developed DBR12 was beautiful and sounded great, its victories were always low-key, and it could never quite match Audi or Peugeot. Its bespoke follow-up, the AMR1, is such a disaster, Aston Martin would like to pretend it never happened. Please? But despite slinking away from prototype racing with its tail firmly between its legs, Aston Martin wasn't done with motorsport. ProDrive developed a Vantage to race in the GT2 class, and that was campaigned by several independent teams to little success. But with rule changes in 2012, the V8 Vantage GTE was born. Launched straight into the newly minted World Endurance Championship, returns were, at first, modest. In the 2012 season, podiums were not in short supply, and a single win was achieved, but the Vantage was never a match for AF Corsa's Ferrari 458 GTE. The Vantage's rise into this list of greatest cars in Aston's racing history is a slow one, not an instant burst to the top. Gradually, through development and BOP advances, the Vantage would become a proper challenger, and in 2014 it took its first GTE AM class win at Le Mans. The GTE Pro Championship came the Vantage's way in 2016, but the big one consistently eluded it. By 2017, the old Vantage was getting pretty long in the tooth, now outclassed in many ways by a lot of its refreshed rivals as it ran in its 6th consecutive season. But then, it happened. In the middle of one of the finest finishes in Le Mans history, after a 3-lap on-track battle with Corvette, Johnny Adam, Darren Turner and Daniel Serra secured the first generation V8 Vantage GTE's first and only Le Mans 24 Hours win. There would be a replacement GTE Vantage with the new shaped car, but it was never quite up to the scratch of the old one in the top class, and Aston Martin would pull out of professional GT racing altogether after 2019. It hasn't returned since, but we'll always have that incredible 2017 win to remember. Those are 5 cars that have been incredibly important to the motorsport history of Aston Martin. But which ones have we missed out? Do you think the DB3S should have made it in there? Maybe even Aston's first Formula One car? Let us know in the comments below.